Moving on, Israel's fourth round of elections in just 2 years' time is now just a month away. And some serious changes to the lineup have continued streaming in ahead of the February 4th deadline to finalize party lists. Joining us to break it down, though, is JPost correspondent Gil Hoffman and Ynet journalist Liran Friedman. Thank you both so much for being with us. Now, first off, in the wake of all the protests and the mass events, critics are hoping that the ultra-orthodox parties, Shas and United Torah Judaism, will lose power at the polls. Do you see this happening? Liran, I'll start with you.
This all honestly always depended on if the general public votes. The Haredi base has always been 8 seats for Shas, 8 seats for United Torah. I honestly don't even see it changing, but the thing that is showing up is support for Yair Lapid, which has been a very vocal opponent of the Haredi and joining with them in any sort of government. That's, in my opinion, the only sign of really anything changing.
Well, Gil, a follow-up. What about now that United Torah Judaism head Yaakov Litzman is entering this rotational deal for control with Moshe Gafni, and as Shas's number 2 is leaving politics altogether? I mean, there are some changes going on here. Do you think that will have any effect?
That agreement was reached 2 years ago. That's really a technical agreement, but there are definitely huge changes that are happening right now. We're seeing the impact of the ultra-Orthodox being at the top of the news every night. It's had an impact on Yesh Atid, as Liran said, going up in the polls, hitting 19 seats in a poll this morning. It's had the impact of a reform rabbi getting the second most votes in yesterday's labor primary to win the 4th slot on the labor list, which is a big deal in an effort by labor members to try to take votes away from Yesh Atid. And it'll only boomerang with the ultra-Orthodox. They're not going to lose power from this. They're going to gain power from this because that makes them even more motivated to go and vote. And that's how we saw Netanyahu, for the first time in a long time, in a poll this morning, being able to form a coalition if Naftali Bennett would go with him, because the ultra-Orthodox would have enough support. Netanyahu's got to hope that the ultra-Orthodox actually stay in the headlines, and if not the ultra-Orthodox, then Iran, which would help him even more.
So on that same vein, Liran, back to you. With that poll in mind, they're saying that the right-wing bloc can get to 61 votes, which is the majority in the Knesset for a coalition, but only if they get Yamina, Naftali Bennett's Yamina party involved, possibly even Gideon Sa'ar, who has already promised that he's not going to be joining with Netanyahu, but Bennett has not made that same promise. Do you see Yamina joining with Netanyahu's Likud?
I honestly don't trust Bennett anymore, personally. Bennett has had way enough opportunities in his not that short, not that long political career to make a stand and say, no, we're not going to support Netanyahu. If he's going for the ticket right now of no Netanyahu, no coalition with Netanyahu, that's all fine and dandy. If he wants voters to come in, that's all great. But the results are going to come in on March 23rd, and on March 24th, he's going to have to make a decision. Do I trust him not to join Netanyahu? No, and I think most people don't. And I think that most people that vote for Bennett now, the core voters of Yamina, the religious Zionists, and the more liberal right-wing voters to go to him, still believe that if the chips are down, he's going to go with Netanyahu.
Gil, back to you. What does the balance in the end actually look like then? Because we've seen a lot of difference of opinion when it comes to the polls, and now we're seeing this poll that the right-wing bloc can actually make it. But Telem has dropped out. Yesh Atid is gaining in power. UTJ and Shas are in flux, as we discussed earlier, and Labor, of course, as well. How is the balance of power shifting?
Look, there are two political camps in Israel. They're not right-wing camp and left-wing camp like they used to be. There's a pro-Netanyahu camp and an anti-Netanyahu camp. The pro-Netanyahu camp now has only the Likud and the true ultra-Orthodox parties. The anti-Netanyahu camp has in its 6 parties, where you can have Yair Lapid and Gideon Sa'ar and Naftali Bennett and Avigdor Lieberman and Blue and White and Labor and Meretz all joining together, maybe Meretz only from the outside. You can get 61 quite easily with those parties if they handle themselves smartly. There's decisions that need to be made over the next 2 days. Ron Hodei dropping out of the race would help his camp. Does he have enough modesty to be able to do that? Obviously, if Benny Gantz would take his party out, it would be helpful. He doesn't have the modesty to do that. Labor and Meretz, it would be helpful if they run together. I don't see that happening. So there are a lot of steps that maybe would need to be taken in order to help bring Netanyahu down that probably won't happen.
All right. Gil Hoffman, Liran, Friedman, thank you both so much for your insights today.